too.
Welcome, YouTube people, to the rustling.
No, it's still there. Maybe. Oh, hey about it. How's that?
I think it's the microphone because the microphone's like.
I think it's on the other ear.
So, like that was the right ear. You just can't move the entire time.
Okay, I'm gonna say like this.
You just have to be like.
Just talk very quietly.
So I
can go get. I can go get another pair if we can hang on a second.
Let's try another pair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Andrew and I will vamp on the YouTube live.
Yeah. We'll talk to all 0 viewers. How you doing, 0 viewers?
Doing pretty good. pretty good.
Glad to hear him.
We're gonna do a little game. His name's Carl Havoc. Suffice it to say, he's kind of a lot.
Man, I wish I would have been recording Zach playing Dark Souls.
I think I need to be on the Dark Souls stream, just doing my thing.
You should.
It's just like a stream of consciousness. What are you doing, cats? Hi, guys. If you guys hear something during the podcast, it's because my downstairs neighbors having a party.
Ah.
And when she was like, I'm having a party, I was like, well, I'm doing a podcast. So who's the cooler person in this scenario? I think it's her. All right, Seth, we can't hear you, Seth. He'll figure it out eventually. No, nothing.
No,
So
nothing.
Check the settings. You might need to change the mic. Or we're just going to listen to wrestling.
Wrestle. The ASMR stream.
Please don't start fighting. Well, you're muted, so.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work. We're just going to deal with the wrestle.
Does your computer have a built-in mic, Seth? Well, I guess I was dumb to ask you because I can't hear your response. That's my suggestion.
And there he went. Seth was a good lad. To Seth. Why don't why who when do we get rid of like drinking songs? You know, like when you're at like a bar or a pub and then you just start singing about like we don't do that anymore. I think that should make a comeback.
We hung out somewhere together where there was like an Irish pub. Somebody was singing Irish songs.
I'm
When was that? Was that in
there used to be an Irish pub where they'd sing stuff in Savannah, but I closed.
That might have been Savannah.
Yeah. I'm just saying they need to bring that back. Because they're all sad. They're all like about like how life is terrible. I'm like, yeah, I mean, we're all at that point too. Like we should sing about it. This episode brought to you by Bring Back. Actually, you should just bring back sea shanties.
True.
What's this one do? We should do that from now on, like at the top.
We really should. We should do that, and then and welcome to Cinematary. Hey, I cannot hear you, Seth.
You still can't. Oh. I just like how reactive it is. Like it's just very sensitive. Like you can hear him just move anywhere.
Hello?
Hey.
What if I did that?
As long as you don't lean back and let it rest on your sweater,
Okay.
it probably will be fine and not rustling.
Yeah, you just have back problems. It's fine.
I'm gonna get scoliosis.
Yeah, but I mean, it's for the podcast. Like, come on.
That's true.
Yeah, please. All right, y'all ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll do Andrew and then Seth for the order.
Actually, I may not be ready. Hold on. Let me open up Audacity. I lied.
And while he does that, I'm just kidding.
Okay. That's good. I'm ready now. You said me first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 382 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford.
Seth Troyer.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be continuing our cinematic journey through the Bible with 1964's The Gospel According to St. Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
Very bossy Jesus.
That's the JC I like.
Before we start, I want to direct people over to the website. We got some we've been mentioning it since the episode a couple weeks ago, but definitely check out Michael O'Malley's piece on Noah. But then we got we also have if you're just in the faith mood, if you're just I'm listening to Cinematary and I'm just really into the Bible. I don't know where you're at. Cam Watson with a new review of Silence, the 2016 film from Martin Scorsese. It is on the website. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about Silence next week.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Talk about some Scorsese. Jesus.
My mom called me up the other day and she was like, "Have you heard of this wonderful Christian podcast called Cinematary? You've got to try it. I think it would turn you around,
Bring you back to the fold."
Today we're gonna do that, Seth.
And here
Today
I am.
we're gonna do
here
that.
I am. I'm giving it a shot. All
right, we appreciate that.
Convert me, Zach.
I want that on a t-shirt. Convert me, Zach. Cinematary.com.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and kick off this week with a new release. Andrew, you caught the new West Side Story.
I did catch the new West Side Story. I really liked the new West Side Story for the most part. I don't feel like I need to do that much background on it. People probably know West Side Story. They've probably seen the 60s version. Zach actually did an interview with a guy. Who is the guy who studied Robert Wise or something? This was on the Patreon way back. What was that?
Yeah, he had written a book about Robert Wise and literally went through his whole career. We talked a little bit about West Side Story. I remember we talked we talked a little bit about that. We talked more about
was it The Haunting?
Talked about that and they directed Star Trek, this first Star Trek movie, which is kind of funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyways, first West Side Story. It's originally a musical, stage musical, adapted to a film by Robert Wise in '61. Now adapted by Steven Spielberg. Spielberg's first musical, which I know a lot of people had been wanting him to do musical for a long time. And now, having seen a Steven Spielberg musical, I would like him to do more musicals. He's very good at it. The thing that stands out to me the most as a positive in this rendition of West Side Story, not necessarily compared to the old one, but compared to other movies coming out now, is that it looks like a time capsule movie. It looks like it was shot with cameras and film from the 60s. Like the type of like texture and like tactile feel that the images have, and like the color has kind of like a Technicolor vibe to it, just doesn't look like other movies coming out right now. And it kind of makes you think lesser of the standard way that people make movies, especially like the Netflix model of like, you got to have their camera and all that stuff. Everything looks a little bit more like TV than what you see here. Almost spilled my water. Which is like very like heavy on shadows and bold colors and like grainy textures and all that stuff. It just looks great. It's a great like aesthetic experience to take this movie in. There's also like this is mostly unknown actors as well, many of which feel like they kind of stepped out of the 1960s too. There is this guy. His name is Mike Feist, Faist. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. It looks like he has a very small filmography. He plays Riff, who is like the Mercutio character in West Side Story. West Side Story is also a Romeo and Juliet adaptation, for anybody who doesn't know. And he is so good. Like, he has this like really kind of prickly, angular face. He has a face that looks very different than like anybody else working in Hollywood right now. And he's kind of this scrawny guy, at least the way that he presents himself in this movie. I heard that he lost a lot of weight for the role. But he kind of presents himself as this kind of guy who, because he's smaller or thinner, is kind of like overcompensating for that by being like really aggressive and confrontational, but like actually pulls that off and like genuinely comes across as kind of intimidating. It's an interesting like role, and he's a really, really good actor. Like, this is the kind of guy who I hope gets nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars. And I've seen mentioned a lot on Twitter with like various film critics doing their like film critics circle like nominations right now. One thing that is kind of a sore spot for the movie, though, is Ansel Elgort, who plays
Baby Driver himself.
Baby Driver himself, little John Green. He is kind of a problem for the movie because, I mean, his singing voice is fine. He actually has a surprisingly nice singing voice. He doesn't do a lot of dancing in the movie. But, some people may be bringing some baggage into the theater about Ansel Elgort because, of course, there's some very credible sexual assault allegations and like predation allegations about Ansel Elgort. And so under no circumstances do you got to give it to him. But also like the bigger problem for me, just in terms of like taking this on face value as a movie, is that he's the one piece of it that doesn't feel like this time capsule 1960s movie. Like, and maybe that's just because I know Ansel Elgort and I've seen Ansel Elgort in other movies, and like every time he's on the screen, I'm like yanked back into the 2020s. But that is the one part that doesn't really work for me. But for the most part, this is very good. The dancing is very impressive. It is like a very classy, like old school type of musical. I think it's one of the best Romeo and Juliet adaptations, both this and the original West Side Story. If I had one other bone to pick with it, other than the Ansel Elgort casting, it is that the coolest moment in the 1961 West Side Story for me, and the part that I use in class most consistently whenever I teach Romeo and Juliet, is the love at first sight moment where Romeo and Juliet see each other from across the gymnasium and they lock eyes, and there's this surreal, like painterly moment where everybody on screen but them kind of like falls away and like melts into color, and they are left on screen alone in this like starry void, and they like very slowly come up to each other and have this little like waltz ballet thing. It was like completely wordless exchange, or mostly wordless exchange. And then it culminates in a kiss, which gets interrupted. And that, I was waiting for that to happen in this movie because like it's the coolest part. It's the most like movie magic part of West Side Story. And I was like, man, I can't wait to see what Spielberg is going to do with this. And what Spielberg chooses to do with it is nothing. He chooses to not include it at all. He instead makes it into like a total like, dramatic realism thing where the Romeo and Juliet characters meet behind the bleachers of the gym, and they do have kind of a cute, intimate exchange, but it's not anything. It doesn't touch the Robert Wise love at first sight moment. People might also be, grateful for the fact that this movie doesn't have brownface in it, which the 61 version does. That is Natalie Wood as a Puerto Rican Juliet. So that's not a great look. This one also includes a trans character. The character who is like a tomboy in the original is now like a trans guy, which is kind of cool. So there's some like a definitely like a lot of attempts made to kind of update the story for the modern day, and also like change things about the script as well to kind of make the social commentary of the story a little bit more pointed, a little bit more pronounced for how the type of, racial prejudice and discrimination that story is about kind of manifests in the present day. There's a lot of attention paid to gentrification and the idea that these slums are kind of like being bought out from under the people who live there to be replaced with some big theater in New York that I'm forgetting which one it is. Lincoln Center. Yeah. So like with there's kind of an interesting, temporal dynamic going on there, because it's set in an earlier time, but it's made in the present day. And it's kind of like looking with that bird's eye view of like how the city has changed sociologically speaking. And there's also like a lot of like the way that the race is handled, the way that people talk about racism in this movie, it like feels like it is much more in parallel with the way that racism manifests today, or the way that it always has, but like it wasn't necessarily represented in the 1960s. So like a needed update in a lot of ways, and also Spielberg knocks it out of the park with all the filmmaking stuff. And the performers, save Ansel Elgort, are all really, really good. So I would recommend seeing West Side Story if you are at all interested in musicals, or this musical specifically, or Spielberg, or Romeo and Juliet adaptations. Like, it is good on all those levels.
I can't remember. Had you seen In the Heights earlier this year?
I did see In the Heights earlier this year, and I gave it a mostly positive review with some big reservations. And watching West Side Story made me like In the Heights less, because I was like, oh, this is what we could have. These are the nice things that we could have if we gave like really great directors a lot of money to make big glamorous musicals. And In the Heights does have some really cool things about it. I thought that Astor had super smart things to say about In the Heights when we covered it on the show several months back. So go listen to that if you are also in the Heights fan. There's lots of good discourse about it, but I would say unequivocally this is better. This is absolutely a better movie, and about a lot of the same things that In the Heights is about too, but less like on the nose and preachy about it, and more like interested in the artistry of making a musical.
I find the less Lin-Manuel Miranda you have in a movie, better off you are.
It's usually a good sign. Yeah,
it's a good sign.
My friend Carter was he was the prop master on that movie, The West Side Story.
Who was?
Was he?
My friend Carter. Yeah, he
Oh,
was.
wow.
He's the best driver I know. He's just always driving around New York City, going to antique stores for Steven Spielberg or whoever needs.
Oh, heck yeah.
X has to be period. We gotta go find the right lamp.
He should have been the baby
props
driver.
to your friend.
Yeah, props.
He really helped the immersion there that I was talking about.
You're welcome. You owe me. Secondhand.
Well, Seth, let's talk about your other friend, and that is Dracula.
But not the Bela Lugosi one. I was watching the real silly one. The Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh yeah, me
Yo.
1992, because it was on Netflix. It might still be there. If you close your eyes and believe, it was. I've always wondered about it. It was crazier than I ever thought it would be. It's all done in like I always thought they went like more like a horror movie, like straight ahead, like realism or something from what I had seen. No way. It's like it feels more like experimental, like camp or something. It's like real camped out. All the visuals remind me of like more like Guy Madden or like George Kuchar or something, but like on a huge budget. Because like everything is just like so gaudy and like lots of weird psychedelic old-fashioned kind of transparencies going on and stuff, just layering images on top of each other in a way that like helps the movie age well, which I think is really wild. Because they're not like cutting edge techniques necessarily. A lot of them are like old,
like George Milius stuff.
Yeah. Like a lot of them are just like old psychedelic kind of techniques. A lot of it is just like very clearly a model train, and it's supposed to look like a model train that they're on, I just loved all that stuff in it. And Gary Oldman is just like a vision in it. In contrast to the main human characters, which are Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves, and they are just bumbling and ridiculous and totally like doing bad like British accents, and like their performances are like every time I see Keanu like in this movie, I'm immediately startled. I'm just like in a good way. I think a lot of people were annoyed by it like when it came out, because there was like more, like, even more of a stigma back then of like who is this hunk? We can't have him in serious movies, kind of thing. But like that's the whole thing. This is batshit crazy movie. Like put Keanu at the center of this thing and have him go like, "Oh, sir, is that a sword?" And then Gary Oldman is like, "Yes," and he like slashes his hand and licks it, and all kinds of shit like that. Gary Oldman is wild. He gets so many like transformations. He's just he goes from like sexy knight guy, and then he's like an old Palpatine guy, which his makeup is incredible. The original meeting, which it seems like it's pretty word for word from the book, from what little I know, of like when Keanu, like the famous scene where like the main character goes to Transylvania, goes to Dracula's castle, and Dracula answers the door and he's like, "I am Dracula," and they have dinner and all that, and they're really just discussing like
how did it go again?
"I am Dracula." That's how it went. That's what he said. But really, they're just talking about like real estate, which is pretty funny. It's like totally like while they're having this like which is par for the course for the rest of the movie in comparison to the book. Like most of the book dialogue is like pretty dry and like not a lot is like going on, and so Francis Ford Coppola feels the need, like, okay, they're talking about like selling Dracula's house, so any chance I can get like an animated shadow in the background acting out what they are talking about, I'm gonna do that. It's like the craziest ADD direction like I've seen from this time period. It's so wild. And I mostly, I think it really lands. It kind of, by the midpoint, it gets kind of meandery. It kind of loses that sense of like visual flair. Like for me, like only by the end does it pick up what it was doing in the last 40 minutes. The first 40 minutes, I think is just like 100% like gorgeous filmmaking. Once it becomes like more Winona Ryder heavy, I think I'm a little like,
once it's more about the plot, it loses a little bit of steam, but
which I think is like partially Bram Stoker's fault a little bit. Again, I haven't read the book, but most of the adaptations that I've seen, like that's where I kind of get bored, is like towards that like latter half of the movie, like just before they're gonna kill Dracula or whatever.
Yeah, Van Helsing is just a nerd. He's just a big boring nerd.
Yeah, I didn't love. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins is like, he's fine. He's like, I feel like they could have even. I know they were pushing him to be like really fucking wild, but like I feel like they could have made him even like crazier, and that whole aspect of it. They should have just made Tom Waits, because Tom Waits is in this movie and he's like a tormented like servant of Dracula. They should have just made him like Van Helsing and be this like vampire slayer guy. Like I think it would have been totally more. It would fit a lot more into the movie. But hell yeah, Francis.
Hell yeah, Francis. Bram Stoker's Dracula.
It's a young man's film for such an old guy at this point in his career. It feels like it's so kinetic.
Well, if you want to, if you would like to listen to us talk extensively about Bram Stoker's Dracula, go to episode, what is it? 290? That doesn't sound right. Oh, I guess it is 297.
Man, over almost 100 episodes back.
That seems
that's crazy.
That's insane. Anyway, 297. Listen to that. That kind of, I'm a little shell shocked.
What year is it?
That was my retroactive preview for an episode like 2 years ago or whatever.
Exactly. Real quickly, I want to talk about a movie that I know Andrew wrote about and talked a little bit about earlier this year, All Light Everywhere. It's the latest film documentary from Theo Anthony, and they just put it on Hulu. So for those who are interested, you can find it there. But the film's kind of broken up into two different things. Part of it is a look at our relationship in kind of the history of technology and visual media. And then the other part of it is looking at modern day police body cams. And so like you have part of it is them getting a tour in a demonstration of the, what is it like? What do they say? Like the only company or like the leading company?
Well, it's the company that used to be called Taser because they made the Taser, and now they've rebranded themselves so they can also sell body cams, and I guess so they can distance themselves from like a thing that is associated with harming people.
It's the some pivot to video, others pivot to surveillance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like part of it is him getting a tour of like the facilities that they have, and then a demonstration of like the different body cams and tasers and such that they have. But then the other half of that part is also him filming this instructional course that police officers in Baltimore are taking in order to be certified and learn more about body cams and how to use them properly. And so
there's also the guy who runs the like deja vu-esque surveillance drone over the entire city of Baltimore, like getting a live Google Earth feed of everything happening on every street. Insanity.
And
that was later found to be unconstitutional, and they closed it down. But
and they have and so they have him try, and so like I think it says in the doc that he's like he like couldn't sell it to like no he did, like the police were using it, and then they were like, you can't be using that. So then now he's like trying to go into the communities to like swell up community support for his technology.
It wasn't the police who told him he couldn't use it. It was the mayor didn't know it existed. Like it had been in use for a while by the police without the mayor's knowledge.
And the mayor's like, the fuck are you doing, man? Which, being that it was Baltimore, it just sounds like a plot line from The Wire at some point.
Really? Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. This one, it really sunk into me. I think I'm kind of fascinated by how not just surveillance, but like how we make sense of what's happening around us. Like a lot of this movie is like investigating what is truth, what is fiction, and how does this lens create like this distortion where you kind of have this belief that if you're being filmed with a camera, it's like that you're capturing like the pure truth. But what this documentary also kind of gets into, which is something that I love to kind of interrogate, is like this whole thing of nothing, even if you have something, you're showing something real, like in a documentary, the fact that there's edits, the fact that there's cuts, the fact that you can manipulate the footage in the sequence that you want it, makes it inherently like somewhat like to a degree fictionalized.
Or the presence of the camera changes what you're seeing as well. There are moments in the movie where the people he's interviewing say that out loud, like, well, I would probably be having this conversation differently if you weren't recording me.
Exactly.
Right now.
Yeah. And so it's kind of, bringing all of those ideas to life. I don't think it necessarily, like it's not like a thesis where it's like, this is the thesis and we're going to solve it by the end. It's more, this is the thesis, and then all of these other tentacles kind of come out of the thesis, and it becomes by the end, it's just like, oh, this is horrifying. But it's something that really does, like this kind of idea of capturing the, whether it's with an iPhone or just or in a more movie setting, it was something that like recently we had to kind of like think about, because you had the Ahmaud Arbery trial in Brunswick, and I mean, like how they were like trying to pick the jury for that, and like how can you? There's nobody in Glenn County who didn't see that video of them shooting him. So like, how can you find it? They're like doing all this work to find an impartial jury, and you're like, you're not going to find an impartial jury. Like everybody saw that video and they feel, one or the other way about it, and so it's kind of interesting to think about like what the presence of a lens does, and how I think we don't get that like pure. There's no such thing as like pure objectivity. There's always a subjectiveness to things. And I don't know. It's a fascinating topic, and it's something that this documentary I think engages with in a really interesting way.
I really want to see Theo Anthony's film Subject to Review, which I've heard described in a really interesting way. It's about the like slow-mo, and I apologize for not knowing the like actual sports term for it, but is it the instant replay for like sports events, specifically with tennis, and like looking at whether or not the ball like was passed the line, like using that it with the like high res cameras and the slow-mo instant replay, and having to like get down to the pixel and realizing that like the world is not made of pixels. Like we're really like putting this kind of like digital wireframe on top of something that is much less like, I don't know, black and white than that. He's a really interesting documentarian, I think.
That's kind of interesting because that's something that's really permeated just any type of sport. Is they're bringing a lot of automation into it because they don't want to get into the whole thing of like, was that a touchdown? Was it not they don't want rather than have the referees like have to make a call and like deal with the ramifications of that. They want to like have all this technology in place so you can like fine point. Oh, this is where his foot. Well, it's it's just kind of
the
like
computer's fault. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just kind of well, to me, it almost just kind of like takes the game out of it. Like at the end of the day, it's a game.
Yeah.
Like, why are you bringing in this like computer like that? You're just like the unfun person because you're just like, we're gonna play this game, but also I'm gonna bring in this calculating computer so that we get everything correct.
Right.
But that's what's important.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's fun, guys. We're having fun, right?
Yeah, fun. I mean, the idea is like we create these technologies in order to better understand our world, but then we only look at our world through the lens of those technologies, and therefore we're not necessarily seeing the world as it is anymore. We're only seeing, what the technology tells us to see about it.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I would recommend All Light Everywhere. It's on, like I said, it's on Hulu. It's like an hour and a half. So I mean, or it's maybe an hour 40, something like that. So yeah,
it's great. One of the best movies of the year. You should watch it.
Yeah, I recommend if you're trying to make a end of the year list. So all right, we're gonna take a quick break and then we will be back talking some Jesus after this. JC.
I'll be back.
Same. Or water.
I don't want to be the only one just standing here. I'm gonna go get water because everybody else. Here we are. Da, da, da. Oh man. So there was, I don't know if you've kept up with the Ahmaud Arbery trial.
I have not.
But they
were found guilty, right?
They were found guilty. But one of the attorneys who defended who was one of the defendant's attorneys, he like had this whole uproar because Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson were there and like made this whole thing about how he wanted black pastors out of the courtroom.
Wow.
And the ironic turn that's taken is that there's this whole thing going on in Savannah where there's a lawsuit against the city by a couple of black pastors, and that guy is the attorney for the black pastors.
Oh,
so
interesting.
We were trying to figure it out today because we're just like, he wasn't even a good attorney because they got found guilty. They're gonna be in jail forever. So it's not like he was a good attorney. And he was also racist. So it was like, let's get this shitty racist. Like, at least have a good racist attorney. It's a shitty racist attorney. It was fun.
At least have a good racist attorney.
Yeah.
On YouTube for all posterity.
I'm just saying, like, if you're going to go, so we're going to have a racist attorney. Like, they get a guy who can't even, like, he was a bad attorney.
What you sipping on, Zach?
Got some green tea with honey and ginseng.
Nice. The loud mic is returned.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to get situated. Bear with me.
Go ahead. It was pretty quiet during part 1.
Yeah, you were good. Now we're going to get the nice street sweeper to come by.
Ooh. Nope. I gotta sit like this.
Did anybody go the extra mile and reread the Gospel of Matthew for this podcast?
No, that would have been good.
It would have been good. I wish I would have done that, but I did not do that.
O'Malley probably would have.
He would have done it.
Man,
A real one.
believers.
Rest in peace, Mo Malley. Just kidding. We'll see him next week.
He's dead. But yeah, I needed to look up this one verse.
Is Jessica on an episode this series? She's more in the Jesus.
She was supposed to be on the Prince of Egypt pod and she dropped.
Okay, because I'm just like, she's more into Jesus than most of the people, but all right.
I feel like we got to get her on one because we have the conversation about core members needing to be on an episode every series.
Well, as a Jesus person too, I feel like it's like your duty or what. I don't know.
Right.
What the requirements are. Instead, you got us.
That's the 10th commandment.
Part of that manifest destiny.
Yeah, Moses last week was like, you have to be on podcasts that talk about Jesus if you're a Jesus.
Right.
And then he broke the stone.
That's what we should have. We should have just watched that one scene from History of the World Part 1.
Oh.
Where he brings down the 15 commandments but drops one of them.
How's my mic? Like,
it's okay.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
It's just okay?
I mean, there's still a tiny rustle, but you're okay.
If we want to nitpick, yeah.
These things are rough. I am going to try and buy some new ones before next time. I've never had this trouble.
You know, these little ones you sit on your table are not very expensive. This is the only thing I've ever bought for the podcast in like 7 years of doing it.
The rest of it I'm doing for free. I'm not buying shit.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Jesus.
Let's talk about Jesus.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 382 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our cinematic journey through the Bible with 1964's The Gospel According to St. Matthew. Written and directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini and starring Enrique Irazokai. The film follows the life of Jesus Christ as depicted in the Gospel of Matthew from the New Testament. Much of the dialogue in the Italian film hews closely to the text, which focuses on the teachings of Jesus, including his parables, and on their revolutionary nature. As Jesus travels along the coast of the Sea of Galilee, he gradually gathers more followers, leading him into direct conflict with the authorities. In 1963, the figure of Christ appeared in Pier Paolo Pasolini's short film La Ricotta, included in the omnibus film Robe Go Pag, which led to controversy and a jail sentence for the allegedly blasphemous and obscene content in the film. According to Barth David Schwartz's book Pasolini Requiem in 1992, the impetus for the film took place in 1962. Pasolini had accepted Pope John the 13th's invitation for a new dialogue with non-Catholic artists.
Which I love that.
And subsequently visited the town of Assisi to attend a seminar at the Franciscan monastery there. The papal visit caused traffic jams in the town, leaving Pasolini confined to his hotel room. There, he came across a copy of the New Testament, Pasolini read all 4 Gospels straight through, and he claimed that adapting a film from one of them, quote, threw in the shade all the other ideas for work I had in my head. Unlike previous cinematic depictions of Jesus' life, Pasolini's film does not embellish the biblical account with any literary or dramatic inventions, nor does it present an amalgam of the 4 Gospels, like subsequent films such as the 1979 film Jesus, based on the Gospel of Luke, and 2003's The Gospel of John. Pasolini stated that he decided to, quote, remake the Gospel by analogy, and the film's sparse dialogue all comes directly from the Bible. Given Pasolini's well-known reputation as an atheist, a homosexual, and a Marxist, the reverential nature of the film came as a surprise, especially after the controversy of La Ricotta. At a press conference in 1966, Pasolini was asked why he, an unbeliever, had made a film which dealt with religious themes. His response was, quote, if you know that I am an unbeliever, then you know me better than I do myself. I may be an unbeliever, but I am an unbeliever who has a nostalgia for a belief.
Gotcha.
On the idea of analogy, Pasolini emphasized his intention of not reproducing exactly a historic casual Christ, but projecting the present-day society of southern Italy onto that figure, a Christ after 2,000 years of narrative buildup. As he explained, quote, along with this method of reconstruction by analogy, we find the idea of myth and epic. So when narrating the history of Christ, I did not reconstruct Christ such as he actually was. If I had reconstructed Christ's history as it actually was, I would not have made a religious film, since I am not a believer. I do not think Christ was God's son. I would have made a positivist or Marxist reconstruction, if any. So at the best of cases, a life of one of the 5 or 6,000 saints preaching at that moment in Palestine. However, I did not want to do that. I am not interested in profanations, but that is just a fashion I loathe. It is petite bourgeoisie. I want to consecrate things again because that is possible. I want to remythologize them. I did not want to reconstruct the life of Christ as it really was. I wanted to make the history of Christ plus 2,000 years of Christian storytelling about the life of Christ, since it is the 2,000 years of Christian history that have mythologized this biography, one that as such would have been virtually insignificant otherwise. My film is the life of Christ after 2,000 years of stories on the life of Christ. That is what I had in mind. I couldn't find any contemporary reviews of the movie, but Roger Ebert in 2004 said that Pasolini's film is one of the most effective films on a religious theme I have ever seen, perhaps because it was made by a non-believer who did not preach, glorify, underline, sentimentalize, or romanticize his famous story, but tried his best to simply record it. So on that note,
speaking of contemporary reviews of this movie, I wanted to mention a contemporary edition of this movie, which was kind of the way that I accessed it. I checked this movie out from the library, and I'm going to show the people watching on YouTube what this looks like. But unfortunately, podcast people are not going to be able to see it. This is a DVD that looks like it would be sold in a Lifeway or something.
First of all, it's color.
It's
like
color
picture.
Yeah, we're looking at a color picture of like a pretty sunset and like 3 crosses standing up. And like the gospel in like big gold lettering, according to St. Matthew. And like this is an edition of the movie that came out in 2007, I believe. Yeah. And when you put it in and you hit play movie, what plays is a 90-minute version of this 2.5-hour movie in color. They colorized it. So that was not what I watched. You can watch the original with this terrible DVD, but you have to go into the special features of the DVD to find the original. They call it the restored original black and white extended version.
The gay version.
So just a fun fact.
No, I saw the 90-minute one on, I think Amazon Prime has it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go and find it on another service because, I saw it was on Amazon Prime, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's not 90 minutes.
Yeah, it is certainly not.
It's on YouTube right now. I watched the 2.5 hour one on YouTube.
Nice.
Oh. Well, Seth, what did you make of it?
Oh man, it wrecks. crazy.
That's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's it's just testament. I had never seen this one.
Testament.
Oops. Testament to Pasolini being just like, you can't pin me down the second you know what I am. I'm something else. Like, I've seen a lot of Pasolini movies and I just hadn't got around to this one. And yeah, I mean, from what you said from the wiki page, that's what that sounds like. It's like, we're throwing you in jail for blasphemy, like, yeah, dirty gay criminal. And he's like, you got the wrong idea. You can't pin me down. I'm not so simple as that. I'm going to turn around and make this really complicated, like, true to the Bible story of Jesus. Gotcha. And then after that, I'm going to turn around and make a bunch of horny versions of Chaucer or whatever.
Yeah. Which is also true to Chaucer for the most part.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, I've not seen any other Pasolini. This is my first Pasolini movie. So I'm kind of curious what your take on it is, like, as somebody who's seen a lot of his work.
I wouldn't say a lot. There's still some I'm missing, but
I was expecting this to be wilder. I was expecting, I was going into it. The main thing I knew about Pasolini is that he made Salo. Right. So the Jesus movie by the Marxists, gay atheist who made Salo, was expecting something less reverent.
It's very reverent, but it's still. Well, what struck me the most was like it being such a prologue on accident of what would come in the next 2 decades, right? In as far as cults are concerned, and Jesus just really strikes you in this because they're taking it's both reverent and irreverent by just how like gritty detail they're going into this. That like in no other adaptation have I seen it where Jesus is just like as he probably was just like, they're just guys like with kind of ratty clothes walking around in the desert following this guy, like this one guy around who is saying this kind of scary shit, like all this shit that like basically reject your family, like there's no other like that, like reject the state, reject like everything other than this invisible thing that I'm telling you about to follow that only I have access to. And he has this brooding energy through the whole thing that is both like could inspire like awe in like a believer watching this, but I think like a non-believer like clearly sees him as this like, this guy is on something. He is intense. He is. You gotta watch this.
I told Andrew, I was like, it's a very lectury, bossy Jesus. It's a lot of like, hey, Jesus, what's going on? And he just starts lecturing you for 20 minutes. And you're like, okay, thanks, Ben.
Which that's really what he was doing.
He also has extremely intense eyebrows. Very big unibrow. Yeah. And so much this movie is just staring at the guy's face. I was thinking about, I'm pretty sure there's a part in Paul Schrader's Transcendental Style where he talks about icons, like, Christian art that is just like a saint's face or Jesus's face or Mary's face. And like, they're meant to be like sat in front of and ruminated on for long periods of time. And I felt like that a lot of the shots of this movie were that. It was either like dead on looking at Jesus' face or looking at Mary's face or looking at one of the disciples. It's almost all close-ups.
That opening shot is like, yeah, there's no discussion of, it's just immediately like opens on Mary's face very tight, and then we cut to Joseph's face, like clearly reacting to news that we are not privy to.
Right.
Which really does set sort of like a precedent for the rest of the movie. I realized a lot of it is like, if you aren't familiar with the Gospels, there's a lot of this that would just like go over your head. Like there's a scene where like I know that it's Satan and he's in the desert talking to Satan, but it's just a guy and he's just in the desert and he's just suddenly there. Also, like, how often they even use the name Jesus? Like, I don't even.
Do they
know.
use it at all?
I'm
having a hard time remembering.
Because dialogue is just lifted from the Bible, right? In this, and so there's
they call him like
any
the Christ.
like introduction in the Bible is obviously like, and Peter, who was son of whoever, went down to the stream and then said, but we just cut right to Peter at the stream, or just a guy at the stream saying something. So it is like very just.
Yeah, Jesus just like walks up to two of the disciples fishing and says, "Come with me and you'll be fishers of men." And they just like start walking with him. And like, I've heard that story a million times. So I, understand the pieces that are moving here, but Pasolini just films like exactly what it says in the verse and nothing else. But when you get these stories in Sunday school or whatever, they're with all these embellishments to kind of make it narratively real. But it's actually very parsed down in the actual text.
I also like in that moment, and he does it a bunch of times, but he like does this like quick close up zoom, and so he literally like goes Peter, and like it just like zooms, and Peter's like. It's very it's almost like he's like assembling like a team in like Ocean's 11 or something.
It is like the assembling of the disciples did remind me of like Ocean's 11 or Seven Samurai or something like that. Like we're getting the team together.
Yeah.
Oh, those crash zooms are great, and they again filter back to what Andrew's talking about as like the portraits, these like close-ups of like Jesus giving like a stern like quote to someone, and like then it's always cutting back to someone being like their reaction just being puzzled, and like you can tell these actors are just like being directed in this way of like Pasolini. I just imagine him being like, no, it's the Lord, and he's telling you, and your mind is blown and you don't know what to do with it. And they're kind of like, it's really hard to figure out like what emotion like they're even having when they hear it, because it's just like, he's telling me to like that my parents don't matter or something. Shit.
Stern quotes is a good way of putting it. Like so much of this movie is just Jesus like rattling off one verse after another. And sometimes they kind of build on each other into larger parables and things like that. But a lot of times they don't. A lot, like in the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, these moments of the Bible or moments of the Gospels are just like this declaration of truth, like on to the next thing. And there's actually a bunch of apocryphal Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, that is just a list of things Jesus said, which is like totally like non-narrative whatsoever. And like, I guess there were, I don't necessarily want to place any like making historical truth values of like what Jesus did and did not actually say and what people were and were not doing while they're listening to him. But there was definitely like an enterprise of like just trying to compile, all of the words people could remember or said they could remember coming out of Jesus's mouth. And it's interesting the way the movie kind of just runs straight through all of those as they're laid out in Matthew.
Yeah, there are all these like word battles, like just laying them out. Like my favorite one that I had to write down because I've never heard it before. Like a lot of this is like good reminders of like, oh, that's just a saying that we use all the time, but like it is from Jesus. Like this one though, nobody says this. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel.
Is that a real verse? Do you look it up?
Yeah. He says it in the movie to someone so I guess it means like, don't be so quick to judge or whatever,
I think he's talking about punishing people for the wrong crimes, like
swallowing a camel.
Yeah.
One of the things, that we talked a little bit about the dialogue, but I mean, it's also I kind of want to go back to one thing that Seth said is that it is you got to kind of know what the basic Jesus story is, or you're going to be very lost. And it is like I would be curious to see how to what Andrew brought up at the beginning, how a modern not even a modern like today, but like even in like 1964, like a Christian audience would react to this, because it is so like it's just so straight. It's
Right.
there's no embellishments, there's no flourishes. It's just like this is what happened.
And plenty of like real normie churches get tricked into it because of DVDs like the one that Andrew has, where
He
they
got
just
tricked
like
into it.
they just like pick it up and they're like, "We'll watch this at youth group." And then,
Man, I
I'm
wish.
sure even the 90-minute version is like a little preposterous, like in some ways, to watch.
I mean, honestly, I thought it was a little boring. Like I struggled.
It's dry.
With
It's
this.
dry.
Yeah.
It's pretty dry, yeah. I mean, like there's moments like when Jesus starts lecturing you, it kind of gets boring because it's just him lecturing you, and you're just like, this guy kind of blows. But like there are like some kind of like more cinematically driven moments that I think are kind of interesting. Like you have the whole scene at like the market, things like that, where there's a little bit more action. The way he shoots it is really interesting, and like it kind of captures that Italian neo-realist feel that it's going for, but it feels much more like there's something that feels much more real about those. They're like you see like the whole market scene happen, and like the anger that Jesus has afterwards that seems much more genuine than like a lot of the parable moments where it's just him literally just kind of in close up talking straight to the camera, and you're just kind of like, that's it. Like it's just his face talking, and like
yeah, that brings to my favorite part of the movie to me, like what you're talking about is the sort of verite style during the trial of Jesus, where the entire like 5-minute sequence of like Jesus being sentenced by Pontius Pilate, the camera is like over someone's shoulder in the crowd, and you barely can see anything. Like, so Pasolini is like putting us as like crowd members just observing what's going on the whole time, which is a really bizarre, because I was reading about it, and like his choice there was because he was an unbeliever, he felt he belonged like at a distance from it.
Right. And
really
he does
choice.
that kind of shot a lot during the sermons too. Like we're in the cheap seats in the back listening. And I think I'm really glad that we are going to do Life of Brian in a couple of weeks, because I think that of all the movies that we're doing in the series, like the ones that pair best together maybe are The Gospel According to Matthew and Life of Brian. Because like in Life of Brian, and you guys will talk about it in 2 weeks. I'm not on that episode. Like they run into Jesus at like 1 or 2 points in the movie. For the most part, it's not a movie about Jesus, but it's like examining the cultural milieu that's kind of existing around him. And when they run into Jesus, it's like this. It's like what we see in Pasolini's movie, where the Monty Python characters are like way in the back, and we're like barely understanding the things that Jesus is saying because we're so far away from him.
There's literally a whole scene where they're making fun of that, where they're just yelling.
Blessed be the cheesemakers.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like in Life of Brian, like this movie is kind of happening in the background, And
I totally thought of that too.
And one thing that this movie doesn't really address is that like Jesus was not the only person claiming to have some sort of divine knowledge at the time. Like this was historically kind of like the idea of somebody being a zealot for a religious cause or trying to start a religious sect or something was fairly commonplace. And that
big time for it.
Life of Brian gets into that in a big way.
Yeah, this does express that the temple people, the prophets or whatever that that Jesus is always facing off against with the funny hats, are like hilarious hats. are definitely like, and it reminds you that like these people are out there like peddling this stuff, and it is kind of interesting. Like it makes you wonder, like, why did this guy sink to the top, right?
Right.
And that's sort of like what you're trying to observe and gain through watching the movie or reading the Gospels is like, how come? Like,
I mean, one answer is, if you believe it, he rose from the dead.
that helps.
When all these other guys didn't.
He doesn't rise
Another
from the dead
answer
in
would
this movie,
be
though. Oh
he
yeah, he does.
doesn't. No,
He
he
just
does.
doesn't walk. Yeah, he doesn't like walk into heaven or whatever.
There's no ascension scene.
Yeah,
No,
that's what.
He's just not there, and they're like, "Oh, where did he go?"
The other answer, I guess, the historical answer is like Constantine, and the Roman Empire, kind of made it a thing for everybody. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because it also, I think Pasolini, just by being a non-believer portraying the acts, is also showing like it's not like he tries to sell you on Jesus being like super charismatic or compelling. I think, and so that's the other, you're just kind of watching going like this guy's saying good stuff, but also like like we've talked about, he has intense eyebrows, which that's the
he's telling me to leave my family.
Yeah, he's like he's kind of abrasive. He's very lectury. He's just yelling at you about stuff. Like,
and now all of a sudden he wants to go and die somewhere.
Yeah, he's not.
Holy shit!
He's not wowing you with his. He's not a good salesperson, I guess is what I'm saying. And so it's just kind of funny. Like, you think about that because you see that discussion, I think, now where people make the point, well, if Jesus was walking around today, like, you probably wouldn't like him, because he would be talking about stuff that you disagree with, or whatever.
Really hammered that home.
And this movie is like Project.
Can I ask y'all what you thought about that element of it? Like, I was sold Marxist Jesus, which I think is like probably the accurate Jesus. And I was maybe expecting that to be a little bit more accentuated than it ended up being in this movie. I mean, there's definitely like scenes of him feeding the hungry and stuff like that, but I would expect that in any Jesus movie.
Like an asshole.
Yeah.
On the Sabbath.
I guess what did you kind of want? Because like, this is how I would envision a Marxist Jesus, is somebody who nobody, like, everybody, like, there's people who get him, but for the most part, he's not necessarily. It's not like Marxism has really ever sold itself all that well. It has some branding issues.
Sure.
Marxist Jesus also has some branding issues.
I mean, I guess my thought is like somebody who's like an evangelical conservative capitalist watching this movie they'd probably be bored, but I don't think they would be offended. And I want them to be offended by like the words of the person that they claim to worship. Like, these people do not actually embody his ideology. And I don't know, maybe it's unfair for me to expect Pasolini to like put words in Jesus' mouth that are not there, or to have him do things that he didn't do in the Gospels, if he's just trying to be as reverent to the text as possible. But I think that, like, I don't know, the ideology of Jesus is like aligned with like radical leftism, and that the movie does not scream radical leftism to me.
It doesn't scream anything. It's again very dry, but I don't know. I definitely felt like there was a lot of like him whipping around and being like, give Caesar what is Caesar's and give unto the Lord what is the Lord's, or whatever. Like, these earthly things, fuck them, or whatever.
He did say fuck them, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
He does. They do include the line about rich people not going to heaven. I do like that he included that line.
That whole thing. I forget what else, but I mean, I was very curious about. I wish I would have known Italian for this movie, to be honest, because I'm really curious about this guy's performance. I think it's a striking performance to watch, and he's very monotone, so I don't know how the performance necessarily lands. because I was reading about it, and this is like his first movie or something.
He's
He was,
19.
he's like he's like an unprofessional actor, which I imagine is like, because there's always like sort of a weird thing about casting Jesus throughout movies. Like in like Cecil B. DeMille's, they're always like, you can't show they like purposefully don't show his face or something.
You can't show the Christ figure.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine in this one it was like, we can't have a star of any sort, or like this needs to be an unknown human.
Yeah.
But I was very curious about like, does he do a good job, and what is it like for like your first role to star as like the star? Like
it's downhill from there. That's all I'll tell you
yeah,
right now.
holy shit, you are God.
Didn't Oscar Isaac play Jesus?
He played
recently?
Joseph.
He played Joseph. That's right.
He played Joseph.
It was Ewan McGregor played Jesus.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor did. I think that this guy is perfect for the Jesus that we're describing. I don't think there's anything there that he could like beef up or like kind of get more performative with. Like he if maybe to his detriment, he's just very like, he's very monotone and reads the lines the way they would be read.
Yeah.
And I think that seemed from how the whole movie kind of goes, that seems like what Pasolini's looking for. So, is he sexy Jesus from Benedetta? No.
He wields no sword. He kills no snakes.
He does.
He says he comes with a sword, but I didn't see one.
Yeah,
that's bullshit.
I think we'd be remiss if we did not talk about the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. It uses like some like spirituals, like slave spirituals.
It's like very,
and also
eclectic.
Classical music.
There's like some that are like literal like African. There's like African music. He like was purposefully like trying to have like the breadth of the world or something in the soundtrack, apparently. Right. Which is very interesting. Feels more of like way more of a contemporary like move that someone would make, like making a Jesus movie now, right? To make things universal, like far reaching. But like especially like in the 60s, like hearing Motherless Child like in the early scenes of this movie, and like knowing like what's going on with like civil rights during this time, and like how like so many of like civil rights leaders are like obviously
Martin Luther
churchgoers, and very striking.
I think that is the kind of choice that maybe I was overlooking when I was making my point earlier about it not being like left wing enough. But it's the kind of thing that Michael was talking about last week with Prince of Egypt, about like, the people that these stories are championing are like the marginalized and the oppressed. And so if you claim to be a believer in these stories, like these are the kinds of people that you need to be supporting. Right. So I like that choice a lot.
I just like that in the like the title credits, it has like music by Bach, Mozart, and I'm just like, damn, like coming hard.
Yeah. Odetta. What?
Yeah, you're just like, oh, they're not fucking around. Like they're just like, yeah, we got Bach and Mozart. Those are our composers.
They were free.
All right, Pasolini.
Original compositions.
Any final thoughts on Gospel According to Matthew? I kind of agree with you, Andrew. It's a little, I didn't dislike it, but it's a little dry.
Yeah.
It's just, I need a little bit more spice in my Jesus movie. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure Marty Scorsese will give me. Yeah, Marty Scorsese will help me out there.
Yes, a little film.
Willem Dafoe's got a spicy Jesus for you.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I think it's, I don't know. I think in terms of the series, I'm glad that we included it, because I think it hit kind of like what we want. This is a depiction that is very much trying to like portray the words as they're written, which I think is interesting.
Some of the things I liked about it are things that made it not fun to watch, which
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm like that, I guess.
I did look for the Oscar Isaac Joseph movie and remembered that that movie is by Catherine Hardwicke, the director of Twilight. That is the nativity story. And I kind of wish that we would have done that for the series, but I also like the choice to like for these first three movies, or I guess this one and Prince of Egypt, like two movies that him very closely to like what's in the actual text. And then looking at movies like Noah and Last Temptation that kind of like fill in the empty space around the text in interesting.
And then Back to the Truth with Life of Brian.
Life of Brian, yeah.
He's not the cry. He's just a naughty, naughty boy. That'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can find the Gospel. Don't watch the like I said. Don't watch the Amazon Prime version. It's available on YouTube. Watch the actual one on YouTube. So remember that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematary if you would like to support the show. Thank you to our patrons, Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we will be, like I said, continuing our cinematic journey through the Bible with 1988's The Last Temptation of Christ, which will come out just for everybody on Christmas Eve.
Nice.
Bye.
Yeah, so until then, we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Stay Jesus.
Stay Jesus.
Stay Jesus indeed.
If we did the nativity story, it would have been good to put out on Christmas Eve. That would have been nice.
That movie sounds nuts. That movie's probably really nuts.